Politics has always been intriguing to me since I was a child. Why? That's a bit difficult to put my finger on. I've always defined politics as the art of negotiation. I looked it up, and there are several definitions, but I'm going to share one specific one with you. The principles relating to or inherent in a sphere of activity, especially concerned with power and status. With 2020 comes a new presidential election. Many often choose to keep their politics quiet, and I totally respect that. For this conversation, I've found 4 individuals to contribute to a 2-part conversation. Part 1 is the re-election and conservatism. Part 2 is a new direction and liberalism. The goal is to have a conversation to plant seeds that grow a crop of collaborative minds. This is part 2. So, let's go. And today, we're doing part 2 of the political conversation that was started with a couple of other gentlemen where we were talking about re-election. I love politics. This is a huge deal for me. And I think it matters that people are engaged in their political backyard, right? So now we're going to talk about a new direction. So I have 2 very kind gentlemen joining me today. We were educated together, so we may or may not have very, very similar ideals, but I think we're also both very even keeled. Matt and Shannon, thank you for being here. No one can introduce themselves better than themselves, so I'll give you a moment to introduce yourselves.
Go ahead, Shannon.
All right, I'll go first. I'm Shannon Franklin. My background is in, at least education is in history, major history, but I am actually an insurance underwriter. So didn't go that path that you typically go with the degree. So.
Insurance is important, sir.
Absolutely.
We're you're there when we need you. My name is Matt Riggins. I'm a high school history teacher, football and track coach. In that order, I do care about teaching. I'm not just a coach bro. That's my 13th year in education, and I live just slightly east of Charlotte, North Carolina.
Awesome, and that's really cool. And I'm glad you guys are where you are because North Carolina in itself is what is a purple state, right? So it leans left, it leans right sometimes. And I was fortunate enough to work out in Gaston County, which is pretty conservative, but I lived in Charlotte, which is pretty liberal. And so it's interesting because I got sort of the best of both worlds, especially just sort of being from New York. So I want to start off with a question that I think was important for everyone to kind of chime in on. The 2016 election. I told people before the election I thought Donald Trump would win because specifically everyone was focused on him, and I also thought Hillary was a bad candidate. And your opinions, and Matt, I'll have you go first, followed by Shannon. What did you expect to come from the 2016 election?
I don't disagree that Hillary was not a likable candidate. Even for I guess we're the left, right? And like so I thought I was surprised when they came in. They told us that she was going to win. I didn't burn my Hillary jersey or own one. But I guess I kind of felt like was the Stephen A. Smith quote, right? We got was it hustled, scammed, bamboozled, hoodwinked, and led astray.
Yes.
And so it was something like that. So it was surprising, I guess, in a word.
All right, Shannon.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you run into a couple issues that Hillary was basically anointed the Democratic candidacy and not very popular at that point, and rightfully so. And then you've got Trump that had just this air about him. So, as much as I hated to see the results, I wasn't overly surprised, unfortunately.
And so it actually begs the question about Donald Trump. Shannon, I'll let you go first. For the Republicans, Donald Trump was really a surprise. And so who did you think was going to come from the Republican side to represent them? Because I know Republicans didn't see Donald Trump. So who did you think it would be? So Shannon and then Matt.
From the 2016 roster, I felt it was either going to be Cruz or Rubio. I didn't think it was going to be Trump, but I felt like those two guys had the best chance, probably Cruz more so. Trump just came out of left field. He what's the term? He got the base riled. So, as opposed to those two establishment candidates.
I can understand that, Matt. Yeah, those two seem like the most likely at the end. I actually, as a fairly moderate dude, I'd have been fine with Kasich. No candidate is perfect, and I love them. Like, you name one, and people go, "But what about when he did this?" Like, well, yeah, like find me a candidate you can't do that with. You know what I mean? It's you got to try to find the best candidate for you. You won't find a perfect one, or you'll never vote, which maybe some people shouldn't. But that's kind of who I thought. Cruz or Kasich or Rubio. Yeah, it seemed like the likely one.
Yeah, and some people were thinking Bush, sort of the legacy thing. So I was glad, not to say I was glad it wasn't a Bush, but I'm glad the legacy thing didn't continue. And that rejection of Hillary Clinton showed that the country really wasn't into like legacies like that. But you made a mention about like sort of left field. So I'm going to shift a little bit now to this campaign. So in the Democratic field currently, Mike Bloomberg is the Donald Trump on the Democrat side. And so what's your opinion of like Bloomberg coming out of the blue and basically being Donald Trump, but just sort of a quote unquote Democrat with just sort of a greater degree of success and wealth? So Matt, you first and then Shannon.
Well, I got to disagree with you. He did not come out of the blue. He came out of the red. He's a Republican.
That's true.
Yeah. So, but Trump came out of the blue into the red because he was a Democrat. I told somebody when Bloomberg really started spending a bunch of money that he needs to lean into the fact that he came from less and created more than Trump did. He can't. No one can out Trump in kind of the way that he is kind of a showman. Bloomberg is not necessarily that. And it's hard because you have to strike a balance between appealing to people based on policy, which they kind of care about, and then on personality, which they really care
about. Yeah. Shannon?
Yeah, I think Bloomberg is basically blue MAGA, essentially. I mean, he's the alternative if you want a candidate like Trump. He's got the money, he's self-made, he is more moderate, but you're basically essentially getting the same candidate, just without all the baggage that, well, I say all the baggage, but he's got his own, but not nearly as much as what you would see with Trump. So.
And it's funny because the biggest thing is, because we're gonna get to Mr. Sanders, but I see people have issues with Bloomberg because he's spending money and he's doing these things, and it's weird because we have an issue with corporations funding candidates, but now we also have an issue with individuals funding themselves. So it's kind of weird because it's kind of hypocrisy, but it goes to the next level of hypocrisy of they said for 3 years anybody but Trump, and so now people are here and they're like, I don't want that guy. And like, that doesn't make any sense. So how could you be anybody but Trump and then reject Bloomberg? And now just shifting to the other person, Bernie Sanders. And so in my opinion, Bernie Sanders would have been a better candidate in the 2016 election. I also think Joe Biden would have been a better a candidate to go against Trump in those elections. So for you all, Shannon, you can go first. Bernie Sanders, like, what is your sort of take on Bernie and his prospects going forward?
Bernie's interesting. The good thing about Bernie is his message has never changed for essentially 30 years. So you're getting the same message. It's always about healthcare. It's always about, taxing the rich. So, he's doing a lot of what I think Trump did outside of the polls, is that he's getting the his base riled, that people don't pay attention to. It could work out in his favor. I think it probably would have worked out better in 16 as well. The message that Trump's going to rally against is the fact that, it's socialism, and that could be the cross that Bernie dies on in this election. But I think his prospects are good. It's a long road to hoe for him, but it's different. That's for certain.
Yeah. Okay, Matt.
Yeah, no, he's definitely different. His message has been, pretty consistent. The irony in the GOP, saying like, hey, we can't afford, all these socialist policies. We've got to spend money on the military. We can't touch your Social Security. Is funny to me, and obviously hypocritical. And also, they're like, wow, look how expensive these policies are. But they're fine with, the ballooning deficits under a Republican president too. Bernie, he's polar. He's kind of the left's Trump, where he says some things you're like, oh, okay, that certainly is something. But then people cheer it, and you go, oh, okay, maybe there's something to it. I personally don't agree with everything that he says, but he does have some things going for him. So it'd be interesting to see it play out if it's him.
Well, the thing that's interesting is that I think if you have a heart for your country, you kind of understand the Bernie sort of rhetoric. You don't want Americans to sort of be without health care and without child care and have bills and be poor and be downtrodden. So you get that from a sort of a heartstring standpoint. But like, for instance, Bernie is talking about, okay, well, he just recently said some of these things. Child care. He said he's going to tax the rich. He's going to tax billionaires specifically to pay for child care for everybody. And then they're going to pay for health care for everyone. And they're going to cancel student loans. And I'm like, just if we just look at those three industries, child care, which is $1 billion industry, but if we give everyone child care, how do you pay for that, right? Because how do you train them? Where are these people going to go? Because the facilities don't exist. For healthcare, I mean, if you watch, there is a magic book that healthcare works on how they charge. And every hospital charges something different, because hospitals, in my opinion, should not be a for-profit entity, but they are. And then you have student loans. I mean, you're just going to say, all right, default, just cancel them all out. So what about all the other loans? So, Matt, I'll have you kind of follow up about ideas like the child care, the health care, the student loans. Like, where are you feeling, or what are you feeling about sort of Bernie's proposals on those things, and like the direction on how that works specifically down ballot? Because in my opinion, it causes every Democrat under Bernie's sort of, if Bernie's on the top of that ballot, every Democrat under it in a purple state or a red state completely loses. They're gone. The Congress is completely gone, in my opinion. So, Matt, I'll let you start, and then Shannon.
Actually, can I defer to Shannon let him do the child care question? I don't have kids, he does. So I'd like his answer on the child care thing first.
Absolutely, Shannon, you first.
Child care is a big burden. And, when Jameson was in daycare, it was, we were very fortunate that, my wife had a discount through there, but it can really eat away at your income. So yes, could he? It's not, honestly, it would be very difficult for him to have that ability to get that done. Could there be some sort of, I don't want to say tax credit, but there's one there now, but it doesn't make a big dent. It's tough to say, because you want to see things like that, but realistically they're a long shot based on the Congress we have. And if the Senate stays the way it stays, then you're never getting any of that passed through. I would almost agree that, you've got a better chance with with healthcare than he does childcare. But it's tough. In the three rallying cries he's going after are ones that are real problems for that lower middle class. It works. It resonates, and I can attest to that.
All right. And what about the student loan part? And well, yeah, because you answered healthcare. So student loans, what do you think about just canceling those? Because that's what he basically is saying he wants to do.
It sounds nice. If they could just live up to if he could get the government to live up to what they've promised to do with the public workers student loans and forgiveness program, if they can get that to work and function properly, then I think you're on the right track, because that's not working right now. And that's something that, we're kind of looking forward to in, I think, 4 years, if it all goes well. But it's the question I think that doesn't get asked of Bernie, and is a really valid question, is not what are you going to do, it's how are you going to get it done if you have a Republican Senate, or what can you get done?
Fair enough. Matt?
So the child care thing, I've talked to some friends about this, and one of my buddies actually, now he's kind of a never Trumper, but he's because he's a legitimate, he's like a Justin Amash conservative, to where the smaller the government, the better. And so he and his wife, they've got 2 kids, and basically they did all they could. Their first child was in daycare for a little bit. The second, they were determined that their second one would never see the inside of a daycare, that she could stay home and raise them, because to them that's the best way to do it. And so he's like, no, I don't think every child should have a daycare. But and I also understand, he also understands too, that there's not everybody's in that situation, to where one can work and the other can stay home. I don't know how, anytime you do that, say the government's going to provide something, new people show up, and prices tend to increase, because if people know that they're going to get subsidized, then the market kind of adjusts to that. It is an issue, for, like Shannon said, for lower middle to middle class people, trying to get that done. So I certainly can. I can't really sympathize, I guess. Again, I don't have kids, but I understand why that would resonate with them, for sure.
And so as far as healthcare and the student loan situation, I mean, what do you think of that? Because I just think down ballot that hurts Democrats.
I agree, because it's, they go, socialism, and people go, nope, never. And you know what? I'm going to drive on this road to this school, and I'm going to cast the vote against socialism, because I don't think it works. And they equate it socialism. Well, that's just a slippery slope to communism in a week, which, obviously there's 2 things. It's a false equivalency there. The healthcare thing, I think a lot of people are understandably not huge fans of the Affordable Care Act. It didn't quite get written the way they wanted it, and then obviously it didn't do what people wanted it to do. I got one buddy in particular who's obviously not a fan, because his premiums have gone up, and he's had to change carriers a couple times, because his state, he lives in Indiana, carriers were just saying, nope, we're not doing business here anymore. Which, that's a burden on them, and that's tough, because he doesn't get it through his job. He's got to purchase it privately. But then again, for people who weren't able to do that, to get it through an exchange, if you have everybody, how do I word this? If you've got everybody kind of paying in, and I love that I'm talking about insurance when we're sitting here talking to Shannon. Like,
health insurance is a completely different realm. I'm not even anywhere in that, and I don't even want to be anywhere associated with that.
Yeah, it's
Gotcha.
rough, man. It's rough.
Well, it's so complex, and there's no like, here's the one fix. People let them compete across state lines, or get government out of it completely, or let government take over completely. But the government's inefficient. There's arguments and counters to the counters. I don't think that the hybrid system that we have, that's like a weird amalgam of state run and private, is the best system. It's certainly like the magic book, right? If I have a procedure, like, what's this going to cost me? And they go, we don't know. We don't do that.
Not until you get into the table and you can't change.
That's correct. Like, we've cut you open. We found your wallet and we're keeping it. But it's funny that there are like cash only clinics, and there are places that can do that, but that's tough sometimes too. That's always an option. My sister just had her first child, and their deductible doesn't count towards the bill because it was out of network, which is rough. And she's, so their bills are in the, over 5 digits. And she says, a friend of hers, she's like, well, she works for the government and her delivery cost her, $170.
That's crazy, man.
And it's absolutely crazy. It's tough that again, the economy is doing well, in general. We're supposed to be like the best, richest country in the world, and we have people that use the emergency room as a primary care, or ignore things until they're emergencies because they can't afford to go to the doctor for preventative care. Their house is on fire and they're worried about pulling a weed out of the flower bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, it's rough. So, this is an interesting question to me because while this is obviously the road, a new road, and so I'm going to ask sort of an opposite question of, so what would be 2 reasons that either you would vote for or you think Trump would be reelected? And so, Matt, I'll let you go first, and then Shannon.
I don't know. This sounds so incredibly closed-minded. I don't know who the left would have to run for me to want to cast a vote for Trump. And that's not a it's not a policy thing. Because I said this earlier, policy and personality. Because there have been some things he's done that I've agreed with, and I think have been good things. And he's been a lot more moderate than I think he gets credit for. In that, some of the ways he's cut some government, and he's actually grown some in some places, as far as like increasing spending in certain ways. More of the deficits obviously from tax cuts, which obviously the right and a lot of people are fans of, right? We like to keep our own money. But I don't know, just because of the person that he is, and I don't feel, not that the government has an exceptional record of being honest. I feel like sometimes his default setting is to be dishonest, and then sometimes he slips up and tells the truth. And that's not something, if we're the greatest country in the world, like, in theory, our politicians should be some of the best people we have to offer. Again, we go back to the term limit thing, where that's maybe a way we get those people in, instead of having, mediocre humans setting up dynasties. I don't know. Yes. But I think, the way it sits, I think he does get reelected. That's kind of what it looks like right now.
All right, and Shannon?
He's definitely got the edge. I mean, economy's in his favor. The Dow, other than today's drop, has been, as good as it could be. I mean, he inherited a very good economy too, granted, but I'll piggyback on Matt and just say I don't think the Democrats could put anybody in front of me that I wouldn't at least say, if it's them or Trump, I'm voting Trump. I just don't see that happening. It's going to be, for me, a Democratic candidate, because there's things that, yes, like he has done well, but the presentation of what he's bringing out there and how he handles some aspects is just rubbed me the wrong way. I can't think of a reason why I would vote for him, but he does have the edge in his favor.
And so it leads like sort of to a question about the sort of social climate of the country. I asked this question to the other group of guys that I talked to. What does MAGA mean? Like, what do you think they want it to mean, and what do you think it means? Shannon, I'll let you go first, and then Matt.
Oh gosh, what does it mean? I think it's just probably, in short, a transition to America. We always picture as being America, and for those that subscribe to that mindset, it's having someone who they identify with. In the case of Trump, it's a guy with no filter, and a businessman, and somewhat of a self-made businessman, if you don't take into account the loan he got from his dad. But that's what I think MAGA probably means in that regards. It's just that mindset that, hey, this is the America I picture, and this is what this guy's presenting. And I'm tired of the America that we've gotten these however many years.
Right. Matt?
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that. I think a lot of it is a response to the fact that we elected a black president. And so people who mostly, and God, this is so general. Obviously there are a myriad of exceptions to this, where you have people who had, grown up seeing a certain type of person in office, just old white dudes, right? And they said, that's kind of who's in charge. That's the country I live in. I look like that. Obviously, again, not without exception. And they said, but my life isn't, it didn't quite pan out the way I wanted to, especially in some of like the Rust Belt states, right? Where they started to see, manufacturing go away as the economy shifted, especially, and as with all things, like technology accelerates quickly once it gets going. And so when you start to see those jobs really go overseas, and then they say, well, if things are going bad, who's the person in charge? That's their fault. And so we need somebody who's going to tell us the opposite, that says, we're going to make America great. We're going to go back to when everything was good for you guys. Even though for a lot of them, like, stuff wasn't bad. Life didn't change on January 20th, 2009, the same way it didn't change on January 20th, 2017.
Right.
It just, January 20th, the only reason January 20th, 2009 was a big deal was I remember we had a snow day. I had the day off from school. I got to sleep in a little, and I really appreciated that. It was change I could believe in. And so I don't know what it means, because I've never understood it. I've never lived in an America, and my experiences are different than everybody's. I've never lived in America where I was like, oh man, this place is the worst. I wish so many things would change. It's never perfect. It'll never be a utopia. Life doesn't work that way. But I don't know where else I'd rather be. Colombia, maybe. I don't know.
But what's interesting to me is we look at like, so who would you say is the most electable opponent for Donald Trump that could maybe unseat Donald Trump, and I guess has sort of the ideals that matches, I guess, what the people who says anybody but Trump would be? So I'll let you go first, Matt, and then Shannon.
I would say Tulsi Gabbard is the most delectable.
Okay.
she's I think she's a good looking lady. I don't. Sorry. The most. I don't know, man. It's tough. If you'd have asked me that 6 months ago, I probably would have said Joe Biden.
Joe
No,
Biden can't put a coherent sentence together anymore now.
No,
that's
sir.
6 months ago. Yeah, not now.
Oh, true.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because they all have, it's very easy to find a significant flaw, not in them necessarily as a person or a policy, but just something that makes them difficult to elect. And I think that's an important distinction. And some of it could be personal, some of it could be policy, but they all have, but I'd have said the same thing about Trump before 2016, is that there's glaring stuff that makes them, somebody's got to win, right? The nomination, I don't know who it is. I guess if forced to choose, since that was the question, I can't just dodge it. I'm going to go with probably Elizabeth Warren.
Okay.
Is probably able to reach the more people in the middle, and more age groups, maybe, because she's not quite as out there as Bernie.
All right, Shannon.
Yes, I think Bernie will be a difficult one. I think Bernie can have the same type of impact, though, that Trump did, just with a different group, like your younger, I don't want to say millennials, but the voting youth that typically is very hard to get to the polls. I think he can find a way to do that because he gets people behind him. I mean, you look at some of the people, was it Killer Mike?
It is.
Yeah, Killer Mike, yeah.
I mean, he's got Killer Mike, and, he's got all these, people. I mean, they're holding who was it I saw today?
Public Enemy.
Yes, thank you. Out in L.A. He's got Public Enemy out there. So I'm like, he's going to get people who don't normally come to the polls. No, he's not going to get the middle ground. But, he's not going to get everything that he says he wants done because it's just not going to happen in this country. It's just not. I think he's got a good chance. But then if I had to say outside of that, I mean, Buttigieg has a fairly decent chance, in my opinion, as well. I just don't know. I don't know, and this is not being sexist, I just don't know if a female candidate can beat Trump, because they always look angry when you have a male candidate prodding them and riling them up. And that's where I think Elizabeth Warren would have a hard time.
It's interesting because they and forgive my language, but they come off looking like bitches, and it's easy to call a woman a bitch, as opposed to sort of a man being, he's aggressive, and
he's
so
assertive.
Assertive, that's a better word.
Yeah, it's certainly not fair. But you're right. A lot of times that is kind of how it plays for a lot of people.
Well, that's what happened with Hillary during Benghazi, and then you look during the actual debates with Trump. And she's very subdued because the simple fact that she knew if she starts attacking Trump and being overly aggressive, she's going to come off looking, like you said, like a bitch. And it's not going to work in her favor, which unfortunately it didn't. The opposite didn't work, but
that's because she was an overall bad candidate, and I am
true.
But so as we get ready to close up, final thoughts. I love when I do conversations with guys, and we're talking about the 2020 election and the social, political, economic climate of the country. And so I like the final thoughts to be for the guests, because the podcast is called Voices. So you can end with whatever you want. It can be about the topic we're talking about or about anything you want. We have about 5 minutes or so left. So Shannon, I'll let you start, and then Matt, you can close us out. But thank you again, gentlemen, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lewis, as always. I think where we are as a country, and I think for me personally, I'm very fortunate and blessed to be where I am in a social economic status. That can change in a heartbeat, and I know that. But honestly, the economy is working good for me, and the criticisms that typically come with Trump haven't affected me, and they probably wouldn't. But he is not ideally the candidate I want, and not ideally the person that I feel is the best representation of this country. But for me and personally, I'm doing as well as I possibly can, and it's in part because of the way this country is right now. So.
Cool, Matt.
I'm man, it's just I'd love to beg for civility. It's not, and it's funny, like the more that people talk, as long as they're not shouting at one another, and they don't come at it aggressively. And now, I'll say the left is pretty bad about it. The tolerant left is pretty intolerant a lot of times. So I would say that, and I'll say we, because I guess I'm technically a little left of center. You can't claim tolerance if you hate people who disagree with you. You
the
don't
woke left.
Correct. You don't have to agree with people, but if you want to be heard, you have to be willing to let others be heard as well. And on the right, y'all don't get to call us snowflakes if you get offended when people say bad things about President Trump. You can't have it both ways. Just have conversations and understand that you should be civil to people. And you know what? Put away your jersey. Political team sports doesn't make the country. It doesn't make America great, and it won't keep America great. Because you have to understand that candidates are human and there will be flaws, and it's okay to support your candidate, but you also need to admit when they make mistakes, and to own it. Don't say, well, oh, that's because the Democrats this, or well, if the Republicans would just, you can't. Sometimes there's some truth to those statements, but just be civil to one another and take away your political team sports, and don't just yell at other people because they're wearing red and you're in blue. That's pretty much all I would just do it. Do it because we told you to. The authoritarian left. Here we are.